on, everybody? I want to start a series on typography, and I'll be honest, I'm not really big on typography. I'm not an expert, and so sometimes I have to rely on some people that know a lot. And I found this website, Butterick's Practical Typography, and so I would like to take some of these concepts and put them into a website, and I want to encourage you to do the same. And this is especially important if you don't know about typography and you don't know where to begin. What we're going to do is we're going to take this article and we're going to do this in a couple of stages. We're going to do this typography in 10 minutes. I'm going to see if we can get this in 10 minutes. And then I'm probably going to look at a couple of the key rules as they relate to headers, and possibly maybe on a third video do some other rules related to typography. But really, I wanted to just focus on this first article. It's typography in 10 minutes. It's got a list of 5 steps. The 10 minutes is about how long it takes you to read it once and read it a second time to really understand. Okay. And the idea here is we're just going to go ahead and focus on these. If the first step, number 1, is that the typography, the quality of it is really dependent upon the body text. Okay, and the reason why is a couple of reasons. The author is suggesting because there's more body text than anything else, but I want to talk in terms of web design. If you look here at any web page, the body is what holds all the content, and so we're going to target the body first in our styles, and we're going to do what we can to apply these 5 steps here. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and the first thing we want to look at is step number 2, and that's point size. One of the things is he talks about both print and web, and our focus is on the web. So the range that this author is suggesting is around 15 to 25 pixels for the point size of standard body text. In our case, we're thinking the paragraph. And at some point, guys, we're going to choose a different font, and we may need to adjust that accordingly. But for now, we're just going to start off, and we're going to try to get our text around that size. Now, before we do, we need some HTML to work with. And so let's just take a look at this particular page and see what it looks like without any CSS applied. And I believe this would be it. So I'm going to get the developer tool, and I'm just going to find out where it's set. So what you can do is you go to More Tools, and right here, Developer Tools, Control-Shift-I. In my case, F12, that's the one. And the first thing I want to do is grab the paragraph, because I want to get the size of the paragraph text. And one of the things you can do is in the Developer tool, you want to move this over so you can see this here. You can see the code here, and you can see styles. And what we're going for is computed. Computed is sort of after everything's been applied to it, what are we looking at? And it looks at every possible property of the paragraph. So we're going to scroll down until we see font size. We're looking for font size. Right here, it says it's 20 pixels right off the bat. So that's actually a pretty decent size for our font to begin with. So I'm actually not even going to touch it just yet. My recommendation is you start with a mobile-first design. Think in terms of people who are using mobile devices. So I'm going to use this right here. So right here is maybe a typical phone browser looking at this text here. And if anything, you may want to make your font size a little bit larger rather than smaller. Okay, first things first, we need to add some style sheets. And right now there is no style tag in my head and no link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a CSS external style sheet. And I'm going to make it an external style sheet. And the reason why is I've got my folder with my website project, and I want all of my pages to have the same typography on it. So rather than put a style tag in each page, I'm going to link to an external style sheet. Before I even do that, though, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to drop all of my CSS files in there. So I'm going to create a new folder, call it CSS. Before I do it, I'm going to go ahead and do this full screen. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to move this file to the right. So I'm just going to split it to the right and have the HTML on the left. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a comment here. And we're going to call it typography.css. Okay, so here is my comment here. I gave credit from Typography in 10 minutes. There's the URL. And what I'm going to do is in the head of my document, I'm going to create a link tag, like so. Save my changes here. And now I'm going to save this untitled file. Notice I now have the CSS folder. And I'm just going to put typography.css. And once I save it, now I got it ready. As you may recall, the first thing it said is we're going to talk about the body text. We're actually going to target the body selector. So now we're going to make all changes to the body. We're back. We're on step number 3. We'll come back to 2 if we need to. Number 3 is line spacing. That is the vertical distance between lines. It should be 120% to 145% of the point size. And in word processors, you have an exact line spacing, but we have line height in CSS. And so we're going to use line height, and we're going to aim for about, we'll just split the difference. Let's do about a 132, okay? We can even try 132.5, and bam, we'll just like right be in between. So that's line height, right? So here we go. Body, line height, 1.3, all right, 325. There's our line height. And this is working off of like a percentage, I believe. So we're going to save our changes, and we're actually going to see the first change in typography on our page. You ready for this? Oh, they were ready for that. Let's close that. Here we go in 5. Take a look at these browsers, or take a look at these paragraphs here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wow, huge, right? It's there. It's slight, but it's there. All right, we're not done. There is much, much more. Hold on. Hold on to your shorts. It's number 4. Hey, we're almost there. 4 out of 5. This really wasn't that much. Line length. Now, this is an interesting thing. So, we're aiming for about 45 to 90 characters per line. And what we're going to do is it says 2 to 3 lowercase alphabets. And right here, we're on 2 going on 3. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and copy all this. Actually, I'm just going to copy 1 alphabet, like so. Copy. And I'm actually going to drop this in as a reference. So I go in here, in my reference, and I'm just going to stick this paragraph right after the header. Now, kids, you know, I don't recommend you just do this and leave it. I do recommend you do it once, figure out your line, your width, and then go from there. If we take some tag that can contain everything and set the width on that tag, we can make everything fit within that width. One of the problems is we've got all these tags in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to surround all of these tags with an outer tag. We'll call it a container. And I'm going to just create, you can do it as a div. I like to use these tags, like section. And I'm going to give this one an ID. And I'm going to give an ID of a page. And you can give it other IDs, but an ID of page is a very common ID that I've seen for just such a purpose as this. And I'm going to go down all the way to the bottom. And right before I close the body, I'm going to close that section tag. Okay. And everything in the section, I'm going to tab over one more. So I'm just going to highlight all this and hit the tab key. Okay, when you're done, after you open the body, you should have a section tag and give it an ID of page. If you change the ID name, just make note of that in your typography page. But in here, we're going to set the width on this ID of page. And then notice it's open right after you open the body. It's closed right before you close the body. See that? So that's our section. If you don't do this, this next effect will not work. Okay. So then we go in here, and now we're going to target that page. So we use the hashtag to target it by ID. And we're going to use a width. And what we're going to do is we're going to use an EM. And we're going to go ahead and try 40 EM. And EM stands for the height of the font. So when we go back here, and it says here that we're aiming for 45 to 90 characters, let's start with just that 40 to begin with. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save this page. We're going to save over here. So we need them both saved. And then we're going to go back to our page and hit refresh. And what we want to see is you see that right there? That kind of ends right there. And then my text goes beyond. That means 40 is greater or wider than 3 alphabets. So we're breaking the rule with an EM of 40. So we're going to go in here. We're going to change this to, let's drop it by 5. Let's try 35. We're going to do an EM of 35. I'm going to hit refresh. And now if you look here, this right here, this sentence or this line is right about the width of 3 alphabets. So I'm thinking 35 is probably the maximum you want to go with all else being the same. Did you notice one other little thing is that when I put my header 1 inside of a section, it got smaller. You see that? This is now smaller than it was before. It was actually wider than this. Just to keep it a nice even number, I'm even going to scale it back to 34. And we're going to look at the last one here. And the last one is font choice. Now, the main guideline here, and I totally agree, is don't use the system fonts. Okay, we've seen them all before. We've been there, we've done that. Okay, he recommends you buy a professional font, and conveniently, his first 2 recommendations are fonts that he created. Go figure. However, you can go to font recommendations and you can take a look at some other fonts that are in here. I went ahead and I looked over a lot of these, and most of these you have to pay for, and that was kind of his idea. You pay for it because you pay for it, you'll get a better font. And that may be the case, but I'm an educator. You are students. We don't just throw around cash that way, right? Now, if you're a web designer and you've got clients and they're paying you money, just up your cost by the cost of the font. Put it on their bill, charge them for it. It's their website you're making for them, right? Make them pay for it. If you're smart, you just make it part of your cost and you purchase it so you have the rights to the font. You could use it on other sites. I'm just saying. That's just how I would go about it. All right. But for that, we need to talk about fonts. And so I know we're going a little over time for what I'd like to, but let's just go ahead and get some Google fonts. So we're going to go over here and just go to fonts.google.com. This is your quickest way to get a lot of new types of fonts. Now, don't go for the goofy fonts. Aim for the more serious ones. If you're going to do a really odd site where you're really going to play around with it, that's fine. But for typography for this, let's stick to the more common ones. So we're going to get rid of monospace. We're going to get rid of handwriting. I'm even going to get rid of display. We're just going to focus on either serif or sans serif. Now, there's a lot of fonts in here you may have seen before, you may or may not like. Okay? My recommendation is find one that looks good to you. And then you might want to see, you go by trending, you could go by popular, whatever. There's a lot of different ways we could go about it. Don't go for one that's just a little too exaggerated, too out there. Focus on one that you think looks good to you. Okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and just scroll down, and I'm going to pick one. And once I pick it, we're just going to see what it looks like. Now, I prefer a sans serif font, so I'm even going to get rid of serif, and I'm going to focus on sans serif. And so I'm going to take a look at this Railway font. I think I'm going to use it. I'm going to click on the plus sign, and that's going to give me this selected down here. And here's how you add your font. It's very simple. You copy the link that's right here. Copy that. Put that in your head. Put it right after you link to the style sheet. I don't know if I can find where I'm going here. Notice I linked to the style sheet there, so I'm going to paste my font in here. Notice this is going to a live site. I didn't have to download anything. And then I'm going to go grab right here the CSS. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it into the body. Paste here. Now, this gives you Railway and sans serif, and so my recommendation is you add 2 more fonts, okay? And this is called a font stack. So the Railway, we will see this as long as this link works, as long as the Google APIs continues to support Railway, as long as their servers are up and running. If that gets broken somehow, or you accidentally delete a character and things don't work, you could have backup fonts over here. So, for example, you could just write Calibri and like maybe Helvetica. And my strategy here is to make sure I have the web font first, a Windows or a Mac font, and then a Mac font or a Windows font. And then just like the fallback, which is sans serif, because that's the kind of font it is. I save my changes, and we go back to the page, and we hit refresh. And now we styled our page. Notice this breaks right here because I changed it to 34M. I think we're good on here. And now I've just added some typography. I'm going to add one more item here. And that is I need a little space on the left. And I'm thinking maybe this would be better if all of this were centered in the middle of the page. So here's how you center that in the middle. And then I'll be done. Where you did the page and you set the width, just set margins like so. You put a margin, you put 0 for top and bottom, auto for left and right, and it will automatically set the margins on the left and the right. And this will center your page. Let's go back and see what it looks like. Hit refresh. There we go. Now that I've got that working and I like how it plays out, I'm going to get rid of this right here. I don't need that anymore. Save my changes. I've got my 2 links here, one to the style sheet that says typography and one to my Google font. And then all I did was target the body and the page. In my next video, I'm going to cover doing headers because there's some guidelines related to headers, and we're going to add headers. And then maybe we can talk about colors or whatever. But for now, these are just some of the essentials that you want to deal with. The other thing you may want to do is font size. And so I'm just going to do a quick font size since it did talk about it. And I'm just going to give it 110% because I like giving 110%. So I will give this literally 110% font size. Hit refresh. I got rid of my other paragraph. I may want to change that. But before I do, I'm just going to get my F12 and see what the computed font size is. Hit the paragraph. Hit computed. Go to font size. And we're at 22 pixels. We're good. So adding a little 110% is not bad. Before I go, I made one last little change. I changed the font size to 110%. And after looking at it, I decided I wanted to go to the full line height. So this is 1.45. That's about as much as you ever want to give it. So don't go above that. Aim between 1.25 and 1.45. I think that looks good. Here's the final product. I'm going to move this over to the left so you can see my CSS and you can see the output. So you can go ahead and pause this. There you go.